great for us that you're all here, and we hope you have a very interesting and informative day. So I'd just like to introduce our first speaker, who's going to welcome you all. This is Orla Flynn, Dr. Orla Flynn. She's the president of the Atlantic Technological University, and I'll just hand you over to Orla.
Garmagat Nick, agus dús bhálim fáilte cruúla choróibh go léir maidin anseo I campus dúna gáil at Ulster Technologies and Atlantic. So a warm welcome to you all here this morning, and I'm really delighted on so many fronts to see everybody here. So first of all, this is an invitation-only event. And you are all our key stakeholders, so hence you've all been invited. But our mission here, I suppose, is to raise awareness of our plans and our desires to develop a cluster in the northwest of Ireland, which will co-lead an all-island research and innovation response to challenges outlined in the EU CHIPS Act. ATU, Atlantic Technological University, was established in April 2022, and just under a year and a half ago. And we're looking forward to finalizing our first strategic plan before the end of November. Our mission, as signalled by the TU Act of 2018, is shaped by our unique location in the northern and western region of Ireland, mindful of the needs of our region and of our strong cross-border location. And the Act also calls on us to engage very significantly with all the stakeholders in the region. So in developing our strategic plan, our mission, our core mission, is likely to be, even though it's still not finalized, but our mission will be to nurture prosperity right across the region through excellent education and research. And in that regard, today's event is really, really relevant. We have identified a strategic opportunity to work with Tyndall National Institute and Ulster University to co-lead an all-island research and innovation response to the challenges outlined in the EU CHIPS Act, and to simultaneously address existing deficits in high-skill, high-value employment and research infrastructure in the Northwest region. So thrilled that we've colleagues here from the Northern and Western Regional Assembly. Those of you who've heard me speak before will talk about the needs of our region. We're a region in transition. We're a lagging region, which means that we are performing lower than the regions around us, the Southern region and the Eastern Midland region, in terms of our performance in innovation. And the consequences of that in terms of disposable income per head of capita and so on. And that's why we have such a significant role to play in this particular application and the cross-border dimension as well. We have submitted a proposal titled Accelerating All-Island and Cross-Border Innovation in Photonics and Chip Technologies. And that's a fairly ambitious title, and it's a signal of strong intent. And we've submitted that to the Irish government's Shared Island Unit in March 2023, earlier this year. It's based on a three-stranded approach, and I think most of you have maybe received a bit of background on this, and you'll be hearing a bit more about it anyway during the day. But it's supported by the complementary strengths of the three partners, and it recognizes that Seagate are the major foreign direct investment anchor in the region. And the three strands are, the first one is a smart manufacturing research facility focused on semiconductor technologies and photonics. The second one is an all-island center for research training in semiconductor and chip technologies. And the third piece is around skills, training and education provision for photonics and microelectronics and the wider industry in the Northwest cross-border region. The research-led photonics pilot line strand would be jointly led by ATU and Tyndall, with the broader research activity in smart manufacturing led by Ulster University. ATU has strong credentials in workforce development, and also particularly through the Enterprise Ireland funded WISE-R Lab and Technology Gateway here in Donegal, we have a successful record of helping SMEs and startups develop innovative products and solutions using wireless embedded systems and sensor technologies. WISE-R are also involved in international partnerships looking at 5 and 6G for medical applications, and they also bring significant industry co-development experience right across the broad range of semiconductor applications, particularly with SMEs. Just maybe as an aside, those of you may have recalled an article, some of you may have seen an article in the Times, I think it was last Monday week, talking about setting up technological universities and maybe was there a mistake made, questioning whether a mistake was made. And the 5 presidents of the technological universities felt strongly enough about it that we made a combined response. And really, the submission and the bid that we're talking about here is at the heart of that response. It's about the engagement with SMEs. It's about the engagement with industry right across the region. Tyndall are a recognized European Centre of Excellence in Semiconductors, Photonics and Chip Technologies. And again, with a proven track record, and I don't think I need speak to anyone really about Tyndall, globally known, real record in both frontier and translational research, including design tools and pilot lines for the prototyping of cutting-edge chips, and in fostering skills, talent, and innovation in the semiconductor value chain. And having spent over 30 years working in Cork, I know the colleagues at Tyndall very well. I've watched it grow from its origins as the NMRC back in the 1980s. My own background would have been computer science and maths physics, and I would have had fellow classmates would have gone to work in the NMRC, and I'm really delighted to see Professor William Scanlon, CEO of Tyndall, here today. Ulster University have a strong track record in AI, data analytics and smart manufacturing, particularly the application of digital twins and augmented virtual reality systems and machine learning to process control and optimization. UU have led in this space, working closely with major industries across the Northwest, and delighted again that Professor Liam Maguire is representing UU today. And we do a lot of collaboration with UU on various different fronts. In fact, last Wednesday, in fact, I was in a panel in Belfast for the Centre for Cross-Border Studies, and I was talking about the Northwest Tertiary Education Cluster, and that involves ATU, UU, Donegal ETB, and the Northwest Regional College. But I was specifically asked, were there any concrete examples of how we can work together to support initiatives across the border? And there's no better example than what I've just outlined to you today, those 3 strands, and I'm really passionate about seeing this getting off the ground. We've put together an exciting selection of case studies and panels with speakers and panelists selected for their relevant expertise and knowledge. And at the outset, I do want to acknowledge all the participants. I'd say nearly everybody in the room actually is nearly playing a role here today, but really thank you for coming along and participating. The case studies describe how similar clusters have been developed and grown in other countries and how they've benefited the economies of their region. First panel, and delighted to see Jerry Kinlan from Seagate moderating the first panel, and that will discuss the challenge and opportunity of the global semiconductor value chain. So moderated by somebody who's at the very heart of that industry, one of the leading players on the island and indeed in these islands. I'll be moderating panel 2, and we're going to be exploring how the northwest of Ireland is uniquely positioned to realize this opportunity. And again, for me, it's particularly lovely to see the involvement of Tyndall, predominantly based in Cork, but really getting that all-island footprint, cross-border, north and south, east and west. So today is a really important day for us. As I said, our submission went in March. Since then, we've seen our minister make a couple of announcements. Most of them relate to the Northern Ireland side of the border, and we'd really like to see some traction on our bid that we made in March. You know, we really feel that it's an exciting bid. There's something in it for absolutely everybody, and just we're delighted. Given that we've invited you here today, we're aiming to have 10 minutes of Q&A at the end of each of the panel sessions, and it'd be lovely to get your input and feedback on the proposal, and any comments that you have, you can address them to Nick or to us here live if you wish. There'll be a networking opportunity, and it was good to hear the hum in the corridor outside earlier on, but there'll be lunch served at around 1:15, and this will close the event. So finally, I do want to pay tribute to Nick, to Stephen Seawright, Maria Gallagher, our own VP, Rick Officer, and to recently retired Jim Morrison for their role in not just organising today's event, but in contributing to the submission earlier this year to the Shared Island Unit. Gur míle maith Galera Rish, August.
Thank you very much, Orla. Thank you very much. We're just going to push on right ahead. We're delighted to have this first speaker who's come over from South Wales to really share his experience of the South Wales Compound Semiconductor Cluster. This is the history and the story of the semiconductor cluster around Cardiff. Would you please welcome Dr. Wynne Meredith, the chair of CS Connected.
That's great. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Diolch yn fawr. Been working with Mark and William to try and work out how we actually make the connections across the water. And I walked in this morning and William says, great to have you here. He said, but you've got a lot of slides. I said, I know, I've never done this presentation in less than 30 minutes. So I've got 15, so I might fly through some of the slides, right? So my day job is looking after something called the Compound Semiconductor Centre, which is a joint venture between Cardiff University and a company called IQE, supplier of compound semiconductors. So we started this joint venture back in 2015. Operational since 2016, and the act of starting that joint venture was a bit weird in our neck of the woods, to be honest. To have a university working with a company as a formal legal entity was a bit weird, but we decided to do that because that was going to be the first statement that things had to be different to set up a cluster. And the second thing is that back in 2015, we obviously predicted that Brexit, we obviously predicted semiconductor shortages, and we obviously predicted that the world would react to semiconductors. Or did we? No, serendipity, we had a 5 years head start. And the reason being, the vision of one of our founders, IQE, Drew Nelson, who was working on one of the high-level working groups in the European Union, and came back and saw the huge opportunity back in 2015, 2016, that the European Union were preparing to produce a blueprint for the future of microelectronics. And we wanted to be part of it. So we were set up as a joint venture, really as a translational activity. I can see there's a few typos and it hasn't translated to PDF very well. But we were set up really to look at not just commercialization of activity from Cardiff University, but all UK universities working in compound semiconductor materials and devices. So we secured about 80 million of R&D since 2016. And this is the slide, which again is a little bit screwed up, I can see there, in terms of the number of new applications for compound semiconductors, which confuses UK government because they tend to silo things into different technology areas. So when you say that you enable communications, energy, healthcare, it's a difficult message to sell. And that's one of the problems with semiconductors. It's complicated technology, it's complicated supply chains, it's complicated application space. So my first tip, if you like, is have a really simple message. And when we came back, we said, look, there's 4 clusters in Europe. If we want to start a cluster, we need a very special USP. That would be compound semiconductors. And so we called ourselves CS Connected, Compound Semi-Connected. Did a quick analysis of how the 4 clusters in Grenoble, Eindhoven, Dresden and Leuven had developed, and then sold that to UK government, because at the time we were obsessed about productivity and investment in R&D. We were sitting at 1.9% in the UK. The G7 average was 2.4. But if you look at the investment in R&D in the semiconductor space, it's 15% on average year on year of turnover. So it's very research intensive, very productive, and a good message to send. So we started with looking, as you do, as to what you've already got. We already had 4 core partners, again, serendipity, in a 60-mile coastal strip between Swansea and Cardiff, who were in different parts of the semiconductor supply chain. So we had IQE looking at compound semiconductor materials. We had what was Infineon, Newport Wafer Fab, and now Nexperia, which was one of the UK's largest wafer processing plants. We had SPTS Technologies, who were looking at capital equipment for semiconductors, and we had Microchip Technologies looking at packaging. So all of a sudden we got a supply chain. It's the easiest thing in the world to put dots on the map of tangential association with companies that may use a semiconductor. Resist from doing it because you immediately lose your USP. Try and get something that's quite focused and so that you can sell, so that there's nobody else in your neck of the woods who really can say, look, you know, we're that speciality as well. So in terms of building the global case for it, the compound semiconductor market is worth about 50 billion. If you put that into context with the silicon market, it's about $600 billion heading towards $1 trillion. So it's a small specialist market. It's a lot of sub-markets. in terms of the device technologies. And again, we tend to highlight from bottom up as well as top down in terms of the markets that we're going for. So the first wave investment was trying to consolidate research capacity in the region. So luckily we had Swansea and Cardiff who were looking for reasons to build out on their respective innovation campuses. So there's a 300 million innovation campus at Cardiff University at Mindy and a 600 million investment on the Bay campus in Swansea. And so very quickly, the first conversations with Cardiff and Swansea led to propositions, capital propositions, which led to 50 million investment in Swansea University for the Centre for Integrated Semiconductor Materials and 100 million investment for the Institute of Compound Semiconductor Cardiff. Next lesson, these things are really complicated facilities, probably the most complicated facilities you'll see on a university campus. It's taken 5 years to get from planning through to opening the Cardiff facility and about 4 for Swansea. So you've really got to take a midterm view in terms of your capacity here. We also had an investment in what's called a Catapult Centre, which is UK government, I suppose the closest you get to a Fraunhofer. It's a 50 million investment and a 24 million investment into my organisation CSC for CapEx. And a lot of this was cross leverage. I'll explain to you over lunch what I mean by that. But for instance, the investment into CSC as a limited company joint venture was then used to leverage another 21 million investment into Cardiff, which was then used for revenue projects to leverage into Swansea. So these are co-leverage projects, which adds a layer of complexity. In terms of our manufacturing capacity, you can see there we had very large-scale facilities already in the region at Newport Wafer Fab, 30,000 starts a month wafer manufacturing plant for silicon power semiconductors. We had plants that were built for LG back in the dot-com bubble boom, which had been left fallow, and so they were recommissioned with investment from our local council, from IQE. And we had large-scale facilities in chip packaging, which had been several semiconductor companies over the last 20 years. So we had this indigenous core to build on. So 12 deals that were done. Again, all these logos have been converted. 4 around the semiconductor infrastructure and capacity for research and development, about 200 million. Then we had 4 investment deals. This is not the presentation I sent, by the way, in terms of the logos. I don't know what's happened between sending it and it turning up this morning. And then we had four deals, which basically were then companies that came into the region to use the semiconductor facilities. So Rockley Photonics, Microlink Devices, Max Power and Siemens. Now this is the really important story. This is where policymakers start to get it, because quite frankly, when you talk about semiconductors, you're anoraks, nobody cares, right? Nobody cared 5 years ago when we were doing this. They kind of care in government now, but when you start talking about high value add manufacturing on the back of semiconductors, you're then talking about an industrial strategy. Okay, and that's the important bit, is looking at the leverage. Okay, so we went from a start in 2016 where we wrote 10 million on the back of a beer mat and said, wouldn't it be good to get that into the research ecosystem? We're up to $1 billion investment commitment. We've executed about 450. We've got another 250 on the map for the next 2 years. And the target is, can we get to $1 billion investment by 2025, 2026? Right, and again, oh, this is ridiculous. If we look at the numbers, when we started this in 2015, we're looking at about 900 jobs in the partners. We're now up at about 2,600 that we can identify. We've got an economic model which tends to look at not only direct supply chain, but downstream supply chain numbers, which gives us a figure about 0.52 jobs for every job we create. And we've got an export of about 550 to 600 million, which contributes about 300 million to the Welsh economy at about 122,000 a job. So the next phase is, what do we do looking forward? So again, strength in places, with some cryptic terms there. We asked UK government for about 40 million investment in strength in places. And we started by sitting down the companies and saying, look, what would you do in a close to market investment program that would effectively create 1,000 jobs and add to our target? And so that was the starting point. And so each of the 4 indigenous companies, IQE, Newport Wave Fab, Microchip, SPTS, KLA, came up with a program that would effectively create jobs, and the integrated program then, in terms of how we use university capacity across a 5-year period to be able to do that. In addition to the innovation program, we had an activity around job creation using continuing professional development. So we're trying to reach 1,000 semiconductor specialists over the next 5 years. We have an international team that's funded really to disseminate and to engage with other clusters across the world in semiconductors. And we have an economic analysis team embedded. Next tip, absolute gold dust to have an economic analysis team. Ours is embedded at the Welsh Economy Research Unit at Cardiff University. We produce an annual report which effectively shows our research intensity, our job creation, and our GVA credentials. A quick slide to show just the scale on the facilities that we're set up in Swansea and Cardiff. These are industrial scale facilities. Each of the clean rooms are about 1,500 to 2,000 square meters of clean room facilities, 60 or 70 tools, co-created, co-designed with industry. So again, trying to break this taboo of the problem we've had maybe in compound semiconductor research in the UK is that we do the research and then we write the papers and then we come to manufacturing specialists and we look at the paper and say, great device, but I wouldn't have made it like that. And it tends to be game over. So the idea is, how do we put researchers cheek by jowl with manufacturing specialists? So we actually design and innovate with a view to design for scale up. This is a picture of the KLA build. This is a major scalp for us. KLA acquired SPTS. KLA is $8 billion US company, making all the capital equipment for fabs. The vision there was to build a new facility. You can see there, that's the August picture of it, how far we got. This will take us, add another 850 jobs to the target. And phase 2 is already under development in terms of 1,500 jobs on Imperial Park in Newport, which will give us a real beating heart for the cluster. So we have a facility for IQE, we have our catapult, and then we have the KLA campus on the same site. Next message is, which I think you've already got already, in the fact that in the introduction we heard today, is make sure you're linking up with others as centers of excellence. So we've got several innovation initiatives that are effectively linking up with the UK partners. We hold the UK's quantum component foundry. We've got an advanced packaging line in power semiconductors, and we've got a supply chain which is developing, linking up our semiconductor competence with a lot of players in communication systems. I'll translate as Ericsson, Nokia, Thales, and BBC. So we've got this big program looking at under the UK Telecoms Diversification Program. So let's look at this figure here, right? So long-term figure, we're looking at trying to get to 5,000 jobs. We've got, at the moment, we're sitting at 2,600. We think we can get to 3,500 with what we've got on the table. And we've got this long-term view of how we push out to 2030. And the real message on this is not about the semiconductors, stupid. It's about the supply chain leverage. If you look at the way that US government has justified the US CHIPS Act, it's not through the semiconductor job creation. There's a study by Oxford Economics which looks for every job that you create in semiconductors, it creates 5.7 jobs in the wider supply chain of induced if you manufacture high value add products that are enabled by semiconductors. So that 5.7, if we just look at the Welsh growth and the perspective that we got, if we just extrapolate our growth out to 2040, and then we have the ambition to actually regenerate the high-tech manufacturing supply chains in the UK, then that would be 140,000 jobs that we could create. And that's really the message, is where you've got these opportunities for leverage. Okay, so last slide. Thank God. Very simple message. aiming to grow to support 5,000 jobs in South Wales by 2025. I think we're established now as the 5th European semiconductor cluster, and of course, now that the UK has ascended back into Horizon Europe, we're going to need a lot of help to catch up and a lot of partnerships to be able to engage in all the pilot line activities that are planned in the European Chips Act. But there's a big problem in terms of gaps in the supply chain. So the opportunity is identifying those gaps, looking at the value leverage, and looking at where there's opportunities for leverage. And that's why I'm here. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wynne Meredith. Sorry for a few gremlins there, but I think we're going to get our money's worth out of Wynne because he's now going to join the next panel. So I'm going to welcome here now Jerry Kinlan, who's the Director of Government Relations with Seagate. Jerry's going to moderate this panel, which is about development of an advanced semiconductor ecosystem in Sorry. Challenges and opportunity of the global semiconductor value chain. Jerry, I'll let you introduce the panel. Thanks very much.
When I don't know what happened to your presentation, but I don't think it's anything to do with the
Welsh next time.
or the border across the Irish Sea. I'm pretty sure you did a remarkable job recovering. So on the panel today, we have Wynne, who you just heard from. We have Mark Gubbins, R&D Director at Seagate. We have William Scanlon, CEO of Tyndall. We have Stephen O'Reilly. Stephen, you've done many Enterprise Ireland, but you're our chief contact in terms of Horizon and European funding. We have Una Fitzpatrick from IBEC and Hugh Cormacan from consortium. So when I was listening to Wynne's presentation there, I was struck by the ambition in it. And last week I was at the investment summit in Belfast, and a lot of the CEOs from Citi, our own CEO from Seagate, the one message I got from them was that in this part of the world, we're much smarter and much better than we think we are. And if we knew how smart we were or how good we were, we would be far more ambitious. So great to see the ambition there, and that's why we're here today, but to talk about ambitions for Ireland and the Northwest. But we're going to talk about the opportunity for the island as a whole today. And I remember last year, Kevin Estefaniani, the CEO of Intel, said the one thing that keeps him awake at night is geopolitics and everything that's happening in the world. So there's probably no better place to start than with you, Una. A huge impact on Irish policy. I've got to realize they have a huge impact in European policy and have a big presence in Washington. So, Una, what's happening globally? Where do you think it's going geopolitically? And just for a couple of minutes, paint the scene for us on a global basis.
In terms of my role, Director of Technology Ireland in IBEC, I'm on the board of Digital Europe, and we would also be members of Business Europe. So in terms of everything that's gone on with the CHIPS Act, I suppose just in terms of what's happening from a European and from a US and global perspective, I suppose we're all aware that I suppose the semiconductor industry really kind of came into the spotlight during COVID. I think one of the stats I read was that a chip or a semiconductor travels the world 2.5 times before it actually lands with its end customer. And that was probably a just-in-time kind of supply chain system that worked quite well pre-COVID. But I suppose obviously that was thrown into stark relief. And then I think what we've seen is a real realization of the reliance on various jurisdictions. I think in terms of the majority of the world's chips coming from Taiwan, in particular, and then the Chinese and Taiwan relationship has thrown into stark relief. Risks to all our sectors, because obviously other sectors are then impacted by shortages in chips. So I suppose what we've seen as a result of that is the EU Chips Act, and obviously in the US, the Chips and Science Bill. And I suppose what they're really trying to focus on, and I think EU and US were quite similar, they both had around 10% of the chips market in total each, and both are very aggressively trying to get over 20% by 2030. And the way in which they're doing this is kind of on three strands. And again, I won't go through them all, but really looking to boost R&D and industrial productivity in terms of chips, looking to attract investment. And then finally, I suppose, obviously have a crisis response system in place for when these sort of global shocks hit. I suppose what we're seeing from the US side, there's particularly a sour relationship, I suppose, with China at the moment. And I suppose what the US are also doing is a thing called friendshoring. So they're really kind of, cozying up to those who are maybe like-minded, and I suppose trying to really influence at a EU level that US and EU really work together on this, and that they kind of control market share or have much more influence here than maybe they have up till recently. And again, anecdotally, I suppose, a lot of the commentators around President Biden's recent visit to Ireland was that a lot of the kind of behind closed doors discussion was really around that, Ireland's and EU's relationship with China, and how, US really wants to work closely with EU rather than the other way around. So that's kind of the global context that we're in at the moment, and I suppose why there's such a political focus that maybe pre-COVID wasn't heretofore on semiconductors in particular.
Thanks, Una. So maybe on that theme, can we go to Stephen? Stephen, can you talk to us more about funding and the challenge in Europe and Ireland's track record, or what might lie ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. So my main role really is as a national contact point for the Horizon Europe program. And in particular, I look after Cluster 4, which is digital, industry and space. But in parallel with that, I'm also the national representative on the KDT, Key Digital Technologies joint undertaking, where a lot of the micro and nano electronics R&D work is being carried out. Now, the KDT program is started in 2021, running in parallel to Horizon Europe. It's got 1.8 billion in EU money being matched by commensurate amounts of national funding going into the program. Overall, it's about a 6 billion initiative when you look at the industry money that's going into the program. And under the CHIPS JU, under the CHIPS Act, the EU CHIPS Act, this Key Digital Technologies joint undertaking is going to become the CHIPS joint undertaking, and the budget is going to be significantly increased. So the CHIPS JU will primarily focus in on Pillar 1 of the CHIPS Act, which is the R&D element of it. Significant opportunities there for companies to get involved in large cross-border projects. Thankfully, we've been involved in many projects over the years. I know this KDT program only started in 2021, but in the predecessor programs, the Excel program and the Artemis and ENIAC programs that we've always had very good involvement, both from our academia and our companies. In the Horizon Europe program, well, that's a 95 billion euro investment from the European Commission. Lots of that are going into key enabling technologies like photonics and so on. So, there's significant money at a European level for collaborative R&D projects. And thankfully, to date, Ireland has been doing very well. Now, obviously, the UK situation with Brexit and that, and not being signed up to the Horizon programme, we heard recently that that's all going to change, and from 2024 on, the UK will be an associate country, and will hopefully be able to get back up to the level of involvement that we've seen in previous programs. We've always had good collaboration with UK partners in previous programs. It took a nosedive, obviously, with Brexit and when the UK left the program, but I think there's going to be significant opportunities again now from January of next year going forward.
Thanks, Stephen. When can we bring you in quickly here? A lot of the audience here are from Northern Ireland, so just you mentioned some of it in your presentation, but where do you think the UK's semiconductor strategy is going to land, and what Stephen mentioned photonics there. What do you think the opportunity is for an enabling technology and a cluster like the Smart Nano in Northern Ireland.
Yeah. Okay. So UK has set up a specific semiconductor sector team within DCET, Department of Science, Innovation, Technology. They've been operational for about 2 years. They spent a lot of time trying to understand the technology, the landscape, the geopolitical issues, the supply chains. And I think it was in May, they announced 1 billion strategy, of which at the moment, that's over 10 years. We think only 200 million is actually secured, and it needs to go through justification within the next comprehensive spending review for additional funds. So at the same time, they kicked off, at the end of March, they kicked off an infrastructure study, and a study carried out by the Institute of Manufacturing at Cambridge University to collect the evidence for an infrastructure study around 4 key areas. One is silicon design capability, mostly to support the Cambridge Arc activity of companies like ARM and Graphcore, and also to, if you like, energize a fabless SME community in UK. The second is around compound open access foundry. Again, you can see the activities in South Wales and also other centres of excellence for compounds in the UK is very much focused on manufacturing, but there's a huge barrier to entry, right? So if you're an SME who wants to get this new whizzy compound semiconductor device, you've got to spend 20 million to build a fab for the first wafer, and then the next one's a bit cheaper, right? So the idea is, how do you build the infrastructure to lower that barrier of entry? And that's a combination of using new facilities like we've got in Cardiff and Swansea, and also existing facilities that there are across the country, Glasgow, Southampton, Sheffield. So we expect there to be a program to, if you like, energize and use that investment in those facilities for a return investment, economic return investment. And the other area is chip packaging. And really the buzzword is heterogeneous integration, which effectively is putting multiple functions on a single chip and being able to package that intelligently, so you take out labor-intensive activities in the supply chain as you build to the module level. So those are the areas that are under review. The study is due to deliver in November this year, which we assume will then go into a statement for spending review next year. But obviously we have a lot of uncertainties in the UK. Could be a change of government, which could lead to a change in innovation strategy, and could lead to a complete change in attitude towards intervention in such industrial matters. So we're on the path. I feel like we were back in 2014, where we decided that quantum was a good place to invest. It took so long to build the government momentum that it tends to feed itself. And I think we're going. So we've always said that 1 billion is a good down payment to be able to match the investment ambitions of other global players.
So very quickly, to get to everybody's views on this global opportunity. Hugh, medical devices company, say entrepreneur, SMEs. Why SMEs are critical, but why should SMEs, first of all, why medical devices company? Why are you interested in semi? And two, why should SMEs and entrepreneurs be interested in what's happening globally in this space?
Well, yeah, I'm Hugh Cormican, CEO of Cerdan. We're an Irish company based in Lisburn. We also have offices in Australia and Canada. We're a small company, 100 people, thereabouts, but we're in a $100 billion market, which is a clinical diagnostics business. And there's a lot of Irish investment in that area, and there's a lot of companies that, in that particular sector that are supported here and across the island of Ireland. A lot of our future devices we see, and we understand the desire with the EU chips and the American market focus on semiconductors, but we see the semiconductors as part of the modular solution now with photonics. You need to have the photonics and built into modules. Increasingly, the clinical diagnostic business is moving to small, compact mobile devices on watches, attached to people, and you need to be able to fabricate those in a very compact way. Where that future, that market's going, we would not be able to do as a business sustain that ourselves. We need to be part of a cluster, part of a group, and we're part of the Smart Nano initiative in Northern Ireland as part of that. And it's a really effective way for us to go out there and develop that technology to be able to offer the next generation of clinical diagnostic devices. And that's going to have huge impact for Ireland, particularly because of the companies that are here in Ireland already will want to be able to adopt that technology and where we can sell that. And of course, we'll want to sell it across the world. We already always had a global perspective. Like you say, we started off selling predominantly into Australian market, where it's a nice homogeneous market of 25 million people and speak the same language and relatively close to our language here. And they appreciate horse racing and football, so we can relate to that. And now we're selling in Britain quite extensively, and the next step across is actually to jump into the North and South American markets. But to be able to survive in business these days, you need to have a global perspective. You also need to have that core technology, and where that core technology is going is in modular devices. Printed circuit boards are going to disappear. It's really going to be about making modular devices with photonic devices, with semiconductors combined and then packaged in a very small device. And they are going to have huge benefits, and huge benefits for people then, and being able to help them monitor their health and look after their health and save health services a lot of money by intervening early to be able to monitor people who are chronically ill, to be able to intercept and manage their illness in a way before it becomes very expensive for healthcare and for governments. And that's where we see a lot of where our business is related to. So we're very proud to be part of that Smart Nano program with Mark and Seagate, and it's a really great program. I'm quite happy to talk to people about it over lunch.
Thanks, Hugh. So we're going to get into photonics with Mark and William. So maybe I'll ask William first. I mean, we're talking about Shared Island here, and probably nobody's better placed to talk Shared Island when you hear his accent and realise he's working out of Cork. So William, two things, well, some of the time. So two things. One is if you can give us your views just quickly on the global opportunity. But then I'd like to get into this idea of how well placed Ireland is, how well the triple helix works on this island. How much of a cluster do we have without knowing it, and how much of the building blocks are there? And then I'll go on to Mark, and Mark will explain what Seagate is, and maybe go into photonics in more detail. So William.
Thanks, Jerry. Can you hear me okay, everybody? Yeah? You can translate the Belfast accent with a wee bit of Cork. Yeah, so I'm delighted to be here today and actually be part of the consortium with Orla and with Liam, Ulster and ATU in trying to promote Ireland and particularly the Northwest region in relation to semiconductors and with a special emphasis on photonics. And the interesting thing is that a few years ago photonics was seen as something new and separate to semiconductors, but actually they're the same thing. And when sort of explained, photonics is a form of compound semiconductor. Thank you. Okay. So the Tyndall, as you might know, and thank you, Orla, for the introduction earlier, has been around for 40 years, and we started off in microelectronics. But everything in microelectronics now, so that's all the chip technologies go into your processor and your computer and your laptop and your smartphone. But that world is actually one that is about technologies which are much broader than just processors. So we always think of the race to faster and bigger processors for AI, which is really important. But that world also includes all of the chips that are in your car, and there's literally hundreds and thousands, probably tens of thousands of chips in your car today. Never mind your television, your smartphone, your medical device, everything that uses technology effectively, that uses electricity, has chips of some form in it these days. And photonics is just an aspect where we can get more data in and out of those chips. That's one aspect. But also we can use photonics for sensing, as Hugh mentioned that. It's very important for display technologies as well, sensing technologies and things like that. And so those worlds in Tyndall, we actually focus on bringing the technology goes into the processors and the technology of photonics together. And it's in that integration and making real products that we focus on. And in fact, that is the strength of Ireland. So the global, somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was a 1 trillion, I think it was you win, a $1 trillion dollar industry by 2030, or actually slightly higher than that maybe.
but it's not going away. It's going to continue to be pervasive in all of our activities as human society, and solving real problems as well. So not just for making money, but also addressing health issues, environmental issues, and so on. So that world that really supports, and again, as it was made by Wynne in his introduction, it really supports nearly every other industry, semiconductors. So we're glad to see the rise of it after being in the game for 40 years now. Now in Ireland, just moving down to that, Ireland's actually in a great place because particularly in photonics, we have a lot of SMEs, a lot of startups that have emerged, and within the global space, we have, I guess, some of the most leading research activities, not just in Tyndall, but with companies themselves. And Stephen mentioned the various programs in the European Union. I mean, Ireland is a major player in particularly connecting small SMEs, startups, and multinationals together in this space. So bringing this emerging technology of photonics, and quantum was mentioned as well as another one, which are really part of semiconductors together. So I think one of the strengths we have in Ireland is that we are connected already north-south. So I see Robert Bowman was here. He leads a centre for doctoral training in Queen's University in Belfast, which Tyndall is part of, and it's also connected to Glasgow as well, which is focused on exactly the technologies that we're talking about here at this event today.
Thanks, William. And just follow on to that, Mark. Maybe Orla mentioned earlier about Seagate being the FDI fulcrum in this part of the world. I think everybody recognizes the importance of having an FDI to support a cluster. Maybe you could tell the people here a wee bit more about Seagate. I know I work for them too, but maybe not everybody knows. I know my own niece and nephews are disappointed when they find out I don't work for SeaWorld. But so maybe tell them about the amount of employees, the complementary, and the PhDs and that are on site. Okay.
Sure, yeah, just maybe a brief introduction about Seagate. First, we're the largest provider of hard drives in the world. I think people have seen less hard drives in their lives over the past 10 years, but hard drives have played a more central role in data storage for the cloud. So the cloud, as we know it today, all the information we have on our smartphones, laptops, tablets, wouldn't be able to be stored on the cloud without the use of hard drives. So we're the biggest provider. Our customers typically are people like Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, the big cloud providers of cloud computing and storage capability. Our plant in Northern Ireland is one of the most capable fabs in the UK and in Ireland. It's 1,400 people, about an 8,000 square meter fab. It outputs about 2 million devices every day. So it's a huge output in terms of capability and what the volume of basically photonic chips and semiconductor chips that we can output. It's globally significant as well. If you pick up a hard drive anywhere in the world, there's about a 25 to 30% chance that the recording head or a very critical component in that drive was made in our plant. So if something was to happen in that factory in Derry, it would be globally significant for the supply chain for data centers. In terms of our interest in photonics, we've introduced a new technology in the last several years called heat-assisted magnetic recording. It uses photonics, adds photonic elements onto the recording head, the component that we make in Northern Ireland facility. And it means that we're a huge now supplier and manufacturer of photonic devices on the island, basically. We have huge capability in terms of our ability to make very small semiconductor dimensions, and we have an ambition to basically grow that and leverage that into the UK ecosystem. In terms of our capability or where we'd like to go, we've seen our collaborative capabilities grow a lot in the last several years with the Smart Nano and I collaborative network, which UKRI funded, involving partners like Sheridan here, Queen's University, Ulster University. That's really shown us the benefit of collaborative ecosystem around a plant like ours. We know we can't survive basically and develop and grow in the way that we want unless we have that collaborative network around us. and that we believe forms the the foundation for where we want to go next with our photonics and capability. In terms of our future strategy and how it ties to what Wynne talked about, and what Williams talked about here, we believe the open access foundry capability that the UK government wants, and that we think is part of a lot of the semiconductor strategies, is something that we can contribute to quite substantially. We believe that we are multinational. We have a closed fab. Not everyone can get access to it, but with the right investment and the right incentives, we believe that we could open up some of that capability to do things beyond what we do every day for our own business. And I think that's a key part of where investment needs to go. It needs to invest in capacity in centers that are already there, have already capability, to open that capacity up and make sure it's collaborative. And we can collaborate with the Compound Semiconductor Cluster in Wales. We can collaborate with Tyndall and other centres to create something that's bigger than the sum of their parts, basically. And that's an important aspect of all of this, both EU and UK semiconductor strategies, we believe. Now, obviously, it's great to see this proposal, what's being proposed with Tyndall and ATU and UU, because the training aspect of it, anyone who knows semiconductors, it's a highly, highly skilled area. And it needs the right training and the right design, fabrication, packaging skills in order to make it work. We can build fabs, buy equipment, but without the right people, it's not going to work at all. So the training aspect and what we're seeing here in this proposal, I think, is crucial. And it's great to see.
Thanks, Mark. You mentioned open access there, and so I'll go with Hugh. What would it mean to a budding entrepreneur or a SME to have an open access facility available?
Well, I think the key thing is, you need very good collaboration partners. I've seen attempts before by governments to help try and do something like EU chips, or in the US, where they bring companies together and try and have them collaborate to achieve certain national goals. They've all failed because too often the partners always want to try and keep their IP to themselves and close the card to their chest. The one thing great about the Smart Nano program we're seeing is that everybody's very collaborative. Everybody's putting the information they're on the table, and they're all very willing to help share with each other. Having Seagate as a partner, and being able to have open access to their foundry, it opens up facilities we just wouldn't be able to access. It would cost huge amount of monies, and we would just not be able to do. And having that collaborative partner there who's willing to support us and be able to realize that together we can do more together than we can individually is so critical. And having a collaboration of willing partners like that is key to that. And that open access, if you look at the costs, and quite often, as I think somebody pointed out before, if you go design something in sometimes the university, when you get then to the actual plant, they go, well, this is not where we would have started. Is a message we've heard in the past before. So being able to work on projects and have the input from people from the manufacturing side is critical to that, and that's something we've found very willing in Seagate. We go up there, they come down to us, and we get a chance to talk and collaborate on those things. So it just means it opens up new horizons for us to be able to look at how we can take the future of those devices and those clinical diagnostic devices, where they can go to the next level, because in a competitive market we have to be there before the competitors. We just couldn't do that without the benefit of having that sort of fab plant and that ability to access those tools and that experience and knowledge without them at hand, and that's great for the Smart Nano. And we have a group of willing partners who collaborate on very different areas. Ulster University on the AI, which I think famously I told our company 10 years ago, every product in the world is going to have AI in it, including your toaster. Maybe a bit ahead of that, but we're not far off. So AI is critical to this, because it's about the understanding the signals that come from the sensors that you're going to develop. There's the work that Yellow are doing in terms of developing, being able to test the devices on a fab or on a wafer, which is becoming more critical. And so there's lots of elements of this, and there's people like Cosmic Sensors and ourselves who are going to be using this for various aspects of helping improve pharmaceutical manufacturing, and we're looking to do it in improving clinical diagnostics work. All of us are working in quite different areas, but we all need the same technology, we all need the same support, and we're all able to pull that together and pool that, and that's just a greater way to be able to work. And if you can find a model like that as well for what you want to do, that's going to be critical to what you're going to have a very successful model, and it's going to be something that you can really create a lot of value for Ireland, because like I say, underpinning a lot of what the business in Ireland with the life sciences industry and medical devices industry, you will need to have a lot of technology.
Okay, we have to push on for time. So I think we've established by now that there's a lot of believers, there's a lot of people that believe we can build a significant and a much bigger semiconductor photonics industry in this part of the world. So I'm going to ask each one of our panelists one question, maybe different questions. So Una, there's the belief, there's the ambition. What advice would you have for us, this community, to influence policymakers? Because you do that better than anyone else I know.
Well, I've kind of, obviously having a look at the call, I definitely agree in terms of the need for a strategy, and definitely I think an all-island strategy is very attractive as well. And a strategy is not just kind of words on a page. It serves a multitude of purposes. It's a real signal of intent, both to people within the island, but also to investors and to those outside the country. So we have things like a national digital strategy. I'm literally launching our budget submission tomorrow, calling for a digital acceleration fund. So really looking to government, to use the increased resources that are there to, we're not saying do anything different. There is actually an existing national digital strategy. We're just saying do it quicker and do it more money and do it faster. So I do think within that and under that, a specific kind of Ireland chip strategy on an all-island basis would be very attractive. And given that, Taoiseach's is running, the all-island and shared island unit, I think getting it in there, getting it through that department would be a major milestone, and I think would really open up kind of getting all the stakeholders around the table, a lot of them of whom are here today, but actually getting that kind of government buy-in and the critical funding associated with it would be really important.
Stephen, quickly on funding, key next steps, advice.
I think from a funding perspective, look, we've lots of opportunities at a national level. So we need to look at how we can tap into that properly and make proper benefit of it. But we also need to look at all of the European programs that are available. So the CHIPS JU, which will be launched very shortly, again, significant opportunities there for a combination of EU and national funding, all going towards a common goal. As I say, look, we've had plenty of involvement in European programs in the past, and we have moved from a situation where we have single players getting involved in European consortia to a situation where now when we have an Irish partner going in, they're thinking about what other Irish partners they can bring into the consortium with them, so we can get a bigger piece of that project, and I think that's important going forward, that, we don't have people going in on their own anymore. We need to have, be they academics or companies, we need to see them bringing in other Irish partners with them, whether they're north or south of the border. Because, as I say, with the UK association now being sorted, for next year, it's fair game for UK participants to target that EU money again.
Thanks, Stephen. From one friendly Celtic nation to another on the outside, listen to what you've heard today and what you know. What one bit of advice would you give us?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. You do have the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, and I guess the main message I say to you is that when you bring the stakeholders together, put yourselves into their shoes, because what's a return investment for Seagate is not necessarily a return investment for Northern Ireland Executive, is not necessarily a return investment for Irish government. So really think about the collective return investment, and you need to make it structural. The advantages, not just on a bit of paper, as somebody said. So you need to say, right, we are going to measure ourselves and benchmark ourselves. And if you say you're going to be the best in the world at something, you make damn sure you measure yourself and pick the metrics carefully so that you really can show progress towards that. And I think if you do that, it becomes real, and keep it real instead of, obviously, it's seen a lot of propositions already in semiconductors which will you know, change the world and employ 200,000 people in 2 years, right? Just be realistic. We were criticized in the early days for being too small. What are you going to do when I get to 5,000 jobs? That's not enough. But actually, if you can show progress to that like a metronome, then that's really quite important. So keeping it real, I think, is my best advice.
Okay, I'm going to ask the final three panelists the same question. 5 years on, if you are looking at success, what one thing would you like to see? And I'll start with Win, because you've probably been, or what, William, you've probably been asked that before.
What would success look like for me would be indigenous companies, startups, you know, creating, there's a lot of opportunity around semiconductors and photonics, not just for fab, not just for manufacturing, but for, as we heard, test equipment, things like that. So a lot of innovations coming out of the talented people that we have here.
And Mark?
Yeah, I'll just add to what William just said. Exactly, that ecosystem needs to be bigger than it is today. So we have that built up where we're seeing things like technologies from Tyndall, for example, finding their way into factories like ourselves, you know, and addressing applications that are wider than we have the capacity or you know, commercial incentive to address today. So if we can build that ecosystem up to make sure we get those technologies that are already there into mass manufacturing, and we can see that happening over a broader ecosystem than we have today, then that's really what we want to get to. And you know, we talked about some examples of where that's happening already. We're learning from those examples, and you know, that's the vision, I think.
Finally, Hugh, 5 years' time, one wish, one expectation.
Well, I saw this morning there was somebody had to find a signature Cleopatra in a document, and she had signed you know, the removal of licenses and imports of wine for a friend of Mark Antony's, oddly enough. But she undersigned it with "get it done." And I think that's the key thing here. You know, the time is moving on. Things are moving fast. There's going to be huge, you know, challenges over the next years in terms of what we have in terms of climate change and other changes. It's very important that we start to make headway along these things. And, you know, too often in the past we have been sort of want to talk too much, and the propensity should be for action. Get it done.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We want to, I suppose for me in 5 to 10 years time, when people think semiconductors now, they think Taiwan. In 5 to 10 years time, when they think photonics, I'd like them to think about the island of Ireland. So, questions? First.
You know, you're looking for 5,000 people. I just wonder what your experience was in terms of getting the talent. You know, where are these people coming from?
It's difficult. It's really difficult. We've got to convince our kids that a career in high tech is not writing apps. I've done it. My son starts electrical engineering this month in Swansea University, so show by example. But we also need parents to get the message as well. So we're trying to reach 1,000 schools in South Wales. Set up a sort of living lab. We've got displays in the local museums, technical museums in Cardiff. So we've put a significant amount of effort into that. So we've recognised it's like a pyramid of skills. We've gone for, we're about to submit, or I think last week we submitted for 130 PhDs between Swansea and Cardiff in semiconductors. We've got commitments for MSc courses. So we put the infrastructure in place, but we've got to create, you know, get the kids on the pathway to get in there. So it's difficult, and you've got to start from ground zero, but don't forget it. So from day one, build in a really comprehensive skills activity, which recognises it may take 3 years to pump, prime and fill these pipelines, and do it again at the level of ambition that matches your growth trajectory.
I think it's also important to point out that the proposal that Orla and William put together has a skills element to it, you know, and certainly in this space, build it and they will come. Question?
Forget the industries that are downscaling as well. We've got a huge downscaling of automotive in South Wales. We're seeing a lot of people cross-training of a certain demographic in really great manufacturing skills but never been in a clean room before. So that's why we've got a sort of continuing professional development program to teach people who worked in the car industry, the steel industry, aeronautical manufacturing, get them in, you know, into it. And in fact, if you look at our catapult, I know I'm not allowed to say this, but it's a bit like a snowflake training centre. We've got a lot of young kids coming in straight from university, cheek by jowl with really experienced manufacturing people, and you know, it's starting to pay off.
Okay, next question.
Thank you very much for the session so far, very interesting. I appreciate that in the Northwest we already have a regional expertise and need. I appreciate that across the EU we're going to have the nation capabilities kind of distributed across the region in the funding package, and I appreciate that once you get these things going it's very hard to change course. But to what extent will the semiconductor cluster monitor and respond to competing efforts in other territories that may encroach on our own niche? And do we even need to? Is there a big enough slice of the pie here?
Yes, why not?
So, I mean, I said it earlier. I mean, semiconductors are not going away. They're for the, you know, the digital transition, the green transition is all predicated on key enabling technology. So it's the latter. The market is growing. And also, we heard it earlier when we were talking about when Una was talking about changes. I mean, there is, what politics aside, there is enough room here for Ireland to take its place. We are already at, Ireland's actually said it earlier, Ireland's already at the forefront of semiconductor technologies within Europe. But unless there's more investment, we'll actually be losing that forward. There's, I think it's later on this month, Fab 34, which is a leading edge Intel investment will be opened. That will be the most advanced semiconductor plant in Europe, but it won't be forever. It'll only be for the next 4 years or so. And there are other investments that we know are taking place. So we have an opportunity, there's a window of opportunity, and I think there's enough pie. In fact, let's just collaborate with all those players because there's enough to go around.
Thank you.
One more question. Yeah, Mary, how are you?
Great, thanks, Jerry. Hi, everybody. Might surprise a few of you in the room to hear that I actually used to work in the semiconductor industry in Belfast. I used to work for Amphion Semiconductor. It is 20 years ago. However, at that time, I worked with tons and tons of really, really talented semiconductor-focused engineers. This might be a question for you, actually, Hugh. What are we doing about, and when I think about where they are now, they're working in local government jobs, they're doing all sorts of things all over Ireland because the opportunities just weren't there for young engineers to really develop their careers. What are we doing about gathering up all those people for a cluster like this? That's my question. Whoever on the panel wants to take that.
Hugh, you want?
Yeah, I mean, you know, what happens is talented people will find roles somewhere, and if there's not the opportunities that we're creating for them, they will take all their opportunities elsewhere. I know friends of mine have moved to other parts of the world. I know that they have moved into other sectors. I think, you know, they would have loved to have stayed in the sector that they, you know, that they would appreciate and being in and that value, and it's really making sure that those opportunities are there. By the way, our chairman of our company is somebody I know, J.J. Doherty, you know, so he's previously founder of Amphion. So you know, we've looked to try and retract talent back. We've looked to try and find roles for people where they can exercise those talents, and you know, people need to understand there's an opportunity for them to do that. Too often we don't do that, and just a point that came up about the education as well, we don't also seed the ground enough as well. It's unfortunate in Northern Ireland we don't teach science in primary schools. It's ridiculous, and increasingly we need to focus on that. Our company spends time going out and doing STEM teaching to primary schools because we feel that's an important program that we need to add to. But really what the government should be doing is making sure that we teach science properly at primary schools and bring it through all the way through, creating that interest, creating and harvesting that excitement, and then making sure that there's jobs and opportunities for them in that on an ongoing basis.
I suppose, Mary, just to reiterate too, I know it's part of Smart Nano and in all our conversations, and you know where this might go, getting more women into tech, more women entrepreneurs. I know it's close to your heart, so everybody here's open to advice and help. Okay. Right, that's it. Right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much to the panelists. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jerry. Thanks very much, panel. Thanks. Hopefully some of the panel members will be around at lunchtime, and if you want to have any follow-up questions with them. We're just going to move very quickly on to our next case study, and this is going to be online. And what we're going to get here is another tech cluster that's been created in a rural area, much like this region in the northwest in France. And our speaker today is Valérie Moreau of Laval Mayenne Technopole, and she's going to talk to us about the experience of the development of a successful French cluster in a rural area, and this is around AR and IR. So hopefully we have Valérie with us.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Fantastic.
Can you hear me properly?
Thanks, Valérie.
Good.
Let you
Great.
go.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks first of all for inviting me to your conference, and I'm delighted to share with you our experience. You okay? Yeah. And so I'm Valérie Moreau, and I'm the International Networks Officer.
Sorry, Valérie.
Yeah.
Sorry, we missed the first wee bit of that. Could you start again, please? Because the sound wasn't right.
Yes,
but if you could start. Yeah, thank you.
No problem at all. So I'll start again. I have an echo. I hope it's going to be okay for me, but yeah, I'll try to carry on. So as I said, thank you for inviting me, and I'm delighted to share our experience with you. Oh, that's better. Thank you. No more echo for me. I'm the International Network Officer at Laval Mayenne Technopole, and we are the key actor for innovation in our county, Mayenne. And so we support economic development on the territory through innovation, but I will get back to this later on. So the point today is to share our experience with our local cluster called Laval Virtual, which is a cluster in virtual reality. So let me first tell you where we are and who we are. And as you can see on the map here, Mayenne County is a small territory located between Brittany and Paris. We are only 1 hour far from Paris by TGV train, more or less 3 hours by car. And Mayenne is a small territory because we only get 300,000 inhabitants in the whole county. And Laval itself is 50,000 inhabitants, and with its suburban area, it gets up to 140,000 inhabitants. So it's a small territory, and the main sector there is farming, and land. It's a land of livestock production. Actually, this is really what we are known for, and this is where the tradition still is. So, as we are used to say, we have more cows on the territory than inhabitants, and we still have around 1,000 farms, small farms actually, in the region. So Mayenne is also a land of industry, because the first industry which in Mayenne was the textile industry, because of a river Mayenne and that we have here. And we also have quite a few industries around the subcontractors for the automotive industry. And here you can see that we have a high rate of employment in the industry in Mayenne, which is about 25% of the jobs, whereas in France it's only up to 15%. So a land of farming and livestock, a land of industry, and nothing really was preparing our region, was preparing us to become an international recognized cluster in virtual reality, because we didn't have any specific development in this way. But what happened then is that so in the period between 1996 and 1999, when no one really knew about virtual reality around the world, the mayor of Laval, François Daubert, was at the same time the Ministry of Research for France. And then he heard about the virtual reality, and at the time the cities of the same time in France were looking to develop new technologies. Well, he was really visionary, and he thought that virtual reality will be the future. So this is why he brought VR from the States, actually, because he was on a visit in the United States, and this is where he happened to learn about virtual reality. And so he brought VR from the States to Laval. So as I said, this is something really visionary. So what he started with is he really wanted to develop innovation on his territory. Because, as I said, it was more like industry and farming. And then the first stone then to start innovation was also to have a business incubator. So this is why Laval Mayenne Technopole started in 1996. And so we were labelized as EUBIC in 2014. And then our mission really is to develop the territory through innovation. So we both support new entrepreneurs developing their startup companies, and we also support SMEs who want to integrate innovation in their product and services. So this is really the goal that we have here. We have different products, different services, and different programs. And we work with the rather small companies here in the Mayenne territory. So this was one of the first turn of innovation, and very rapidly it was decided that one of the field we would focus on, but not only, would be virtual reality. And at the same time, another stone which was brought to the territory was a research and technology organization, because we had known of those before that. So Clarté was started in 1996, and they were dealing with automatism, electronics, and very rapidly also it has been decided that they will focus on VR and later AR. So their role really is to support the SMEs in their technological development. And then in 1999, very quickly, actually, there was the first international exhibition dedicated to VR happening in France and in Europe, and it was called Laval Virtual. So it really started very quickly, even though no one knew about it. And at the beginning, I can remember it was a very small exhibition, but still they managed to attract one or two international companies at this stage. And we are still having this exhibition 25 years later, and we are still number one event in Europe, and I will explain everything about it. So as I said quickly, the starting point was a very, very strong political will. So VR section in Laval Mayenne Technopole, first Laval Virtual Edition, the VR technological platform run by Clarté, and very rapidly there was a master degree in VR, which was established in Laval Mayenne Technopole. Then there was a real-time 3D computer graphics school. So it really means that all the ingredients to develop innovation and to develop this technology was brought together. So companies, research, support to SMEs, and also higher education. So you really need all these ingredients if you want to go further and develop the sector. So that was afterwards, in 2004, there was the first research lab dedicated to VR AR, which was coming from Angers, and there was a branch opening in Laval. And then at Laval Mayenne Technopole, after that, we started to have the first French startups accelerator. And also 2011, we started this challenge called Mayam. It was to bring students and SMEs together. And the idea was really to raise awareness of the companies towards innovation and towards specifically virtual reality and how they could implement virtual reality in their companies. So we got the recognitions from the French Tech label. So we got the label we were labeled French Tech in 2016. So, and French Tech, I don't know if you know, if you're familiar to it, but it's really international recognition for digital ecosystems in the regions in France. And then afterwards, because the different stakeholders taking part in this cluster were in different places in Laval. So it was decided that we would have a flagship building, which is called the Laval Virtual Center. And the idea was really to gather the different stakeholders involved in virtual reality in the same place, and also for visitors, it was also to have a way to show them where virtual reality was taking place in Laval. So in this building here, we have Laval Virtual, the organization, Clarté, the VR platform. We have students in the same buildings here, and it's only 100 meters from where we are here at Laval Main Technopole. So it's still the idea just to gather everyone together so that we can develop more innovation, more product and more research. In 2017, so Laval Virtual went to China because there was an agreement which was signed to develop Laval Virtual in Asia. 2020 was a very special year because it was COVID, obviously, so we couldn't hold the physical event. And in less than a month and a half, the team from Laval Virtual have been able to move all the, let's say, physical event to a digital platform. So they were first in the world also to host this very huge event, and where we saw over 3 days, it lasted 3 days also, just like the original event of Laval Virtual. And then we hosted more than 10,000 people on this platform coming to the digital event. So if I go back to the Laval Virtual event, which is so the yearly event we have, and this is the international gathering for people dealing with VR, AR, and immersive technologies in Europe. It has now become a very important event because here, for instance, you can see the figures of the edition of 2023, which was the 25th edition of Laval Virtual. So it gathers nearly 200 exhibitors. We had more than 50 conference speakers and more than 2,000 attendees. And it's really international because people were coming from 37 different countries all around the world. So not only Europe, but many people from all around the world. So, and next year, Laval Virtual is still going to take place in April, just in case you would be happy to come over. So it's just to say that even starting from a small territory, but with a strong political will, and what was also really important here is that even though the political people changed, it was not the same wing on the political scale, but still everyone here was really convinced that it was important to maintain the number one place that Laval had been able to build over the years in the domain of virtual reality. Because thanks to this event, we have been able to be known not only for the cows and mainly and the milk industry, but also for this very cutting edge technology. So 25 years later, we have been able to build a cluster which is now internationally renowned. We still have this yearly event still running after the COVID and after 25 years. We have now 5 research labs in Laval dealing with VR and AR. We have 5 master degrees and bachelor's degrees also, more than 20 startups and 200 people involved in this sector, plus Art Festival and French Tech label. Just remember that we started from nothing here. We didn't even have a lab. We didn't even have a company dealing with this subject when we started. But the idea was really that we needed to gather all the ingredients, all the different stakeholders to take part in the development of the cluster here. Here are some examples that I wanted to give to you because, for instance, Inozone, it is a company which has been started by a young Belgian guy. He actually came to Laval because he heard about the master in virtual reality. He was very interested in. And he studied in Laval, and then in 2007 he started his company here. And then he employed also young students from other schools in Laval. So this is a very good example because it's really this guy would never have come to Laval to start with, but because there was this very specific master degree, he wanted to follow. He came to our territory. He's still here now. He has started his company, and he collaborates a lot with Bliss Company, which is the first company in France who have developed immersive content to help people to be able to how would I say, to be able to get difficult treatment, like for cancer treatment and for difficult medical acts that you need to have. So it would really help you to calm down and to be immersed in an immersive environment where your mind will be able to go away. So these two very interesting companies are set in Laval because of the environment, and this is where the people decided they would start the company. And those two companies, for instance, they employ about 25 people together. So here are two other different companies. Apsion is a company who was a spin-off from a big French research center. They were located near Paris, and they needed to get to expand actually because they had more employees coming to the company, and they were looking for a place to establish outside Paris in France, and they decided they would move to Laval because it was back in 2005, I think. And they came here because of the ecosystem, because they knew that in Laval here, they would be able to find the students to work with and to employ. They would be able also to work with research centers and with research labs. And they would also gain from the recognition of the city in the field of virtual reality. She's Genius Mundi, the lady who started the company. She also came to Laval to follow one of the master degree in VR, and she's still established here, and they are doing architecture using new technologies. That's just some short example. Just to summarize, Laval Virtual Cluster, it is an important cluster by itself, but it's also a driving force for the whole territory. So, as I said, there is about 200 to 250 people in Laval involved in virtual reality, but it brought much more for the territory. And do remember that we are a small territory in France. And for instance, the students, when all this started around 1999, we had 700, about a bit less than 800 students in Laval. And now in 2023, we have 5,000 students. And the goal really is to get to 10,000 students by 2030. But all these students are not in the VR, AR sector, but still, because of the dynamism of the territory, because of the recognition of it all, it helped other schools to come to Laval, and we see more and more partnership, collaborations between the different schools. and especially, as you know, virtual reality can be integrated in all sectors. So it's also appealing for the other school to come to Laval because they know they will be able to gain from the recognitions, and also because they know they will be able to work with the other school. So there, since 1999, more than 200 startups were created all in all, which is about 1,500 jobs. And as I said already, it helped to give a very specific recognition and attractiveness to Laval and the Mayenne as a very innovative ecosystem, which is now really well known in France. And also, we have seen the development of local SMEs which have been able to implement new tools, not only VR tools, but also AI products, for instance, to develop and to be more competitive. And for the large companies which were already on the territory, some of them have developed a research lab dedicated or implementing VR tools. I'm thinking about some automotive companies. And then it helped also to maintain on our territory some companies because of the knowledge that was on the territory, because of a cluster. They decided to keep their technical staff and research staff here in Laval because they knew they could collaborate with the VR research labs. So we kept them here on the territory instead of moving them to Paris, for instance, because we had this competence. Just over example, we have been able also to develop this new festival, which is called West Data Festival, which is more dealing with AI and data analysis. This is also dedicated to support SMEs in their digitalization process. And we have many links between this new event and the Laval Virtual event and Laval Virtual Cluster. So this is also an event where we intend to go up quite quickly, because we started in 2019 with only 200 visitors, and we had more than 1,000 this year, and our goal is really to go up to 4,000 people in 2025. This is West Data Festival. And also, last but not least, we are also a core team member of a local DIH. And so our DIH here, EDIH, is called DIVA, which stands for Digital Innovation Value Accelerator. And it focuses on application of artificial intelligence, and it also includes virtual reality. So this is also how we had been able to integrate the core team here of this EDIH. Oh, yeah. And one last thing I wanted to say, because thinking yesterday about our territory, also what we put emphasis on here is the quality of life, which is something that you probably do have also, and I'm sure on your territory. So when we want to attract people to come here, there is the technological part of it, but also we focus on the quality of life, lower rents than you could find in other countries, in other cities, lower cost of living, and here how it's easy to get in touch with people because we are in a small territory. It's a human side territory. We have a local dynamic, a presence of nature, and to be able to attract high potential and high skills profiles, then we have also imagine this welcome pack on the territory. It means that we help the people coming to work in the companies here. We help them to find accommodation, to find a school, to find also maybe an employment for their partner. So this is also a work that we do all together, not only the companies, the research labs, but also the people involved in hospitality and economical development. So Here I am. I hope I answered to some of the question you had, and the example could be relevant to us. And I was really happy to share this with you, and I'll be happy to share more if you need, and why not to collaborate in the future. And main thing probably that I must say is that it's very, very important on the territory to work together and to get all the relevant stakeholders involved in this virtuous circle.
Valerie, this is Nick here. Thank you very much for that insight into 25 years of success. I don't know if you have time for one or two questions.
Yeah, I'll be happy if I can answer your questions.
Okay, is there anybody, any questions here from the audience? If you just wait for a mic. Maybe Valerie, if I could kick this off just and ask quickly. I know you're pushed for time yourself. You know, you're 25 years down the line from us. It's been very successful. It's a region of similar size, population, and financial and economic standing. So, what would be key takeaway advice for us in this project that we're embarking on? Hopefully, I know it's a big question.
Yeah, as I said, sorry, I can't see the room now. I just see myself. If it would be possible to shift to another camera.
We
Anyway,
can see you now. You're on the large screen now.
Okay. That's probably why. So as I said already, the important thing is to bring together all the stakeholders and research, higher education, companies, events, you know, to get the recognition. And here, oh, thank you, that's better. Here, it's really a work of all the ecosystem to work together, even the people involved in economical development. And that's really how we manage to be strong and to be all together. And everyone here is also an ambassador, you know, for the Laval Virtual Cluster. Because when I go away, when I travel, we don't only work for virtual reality in Laval Mayenne Technopole. We support any type of company. But when I travel abroad, it's always something that I will, you know, tell to people, because it is really our flagship for the territory, and this is the way we have been recognized. And it's important also yes, to make the thing easier, you know, to recruit high potential people, for instance, because we are lacking of those people. We are lacking of high skilled people in Mayenne, but in the country, in the region. And yeah, this is quite important that we make all the efforts in the same in the same basket, you know, so that we can everyone will support the others here. And what I said already is that we have been supported by the local authorities all the time, and even though local authorities has changed, I mean the political side has changed over 25 years, as you can guess. Everyone was still supporting this sector, because everyone knew it would be appealing not only for the sector but also for all the economy around, and would make the county more recognized and more appealing to.
Great, Valerie. I think some sound advice for us all there. I think we're pushed for time now, and I know you have to get on. So I just want to thank you very much for taking the time to contribute to our event.
You're welcome. Today. My pleasure.
And, thanks very much again.
Thank you.
So we're coming to the last session, and I just want to invite back Dr. Orla Flynn, the president of ATU. Orla's going to moderate the next session. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And it just seems to me that we have all the ingredients around here. Listening to Valerie and to Wynne earlier on, it's we've all the ingredients, but our challenge is to get us together. So I'd like to invite now for this panel, I have Mark Rinsing from Tyndall National Institute. Seamus Carroll, IDA, Maeve Conahan, Enterprise Ireland, Professor Liam Maguire, Ulster University, Dr. Nick Timmins from the WISER, we've heard from Nick so far today, and Professor Daniel McCaughan, Emeritus Partner, Kernel Capital. Wonderful. Brilliant. Thank you all. So we're kind of pushing on a little bit in time, and I was really struck by some of the words Hugh, I think, spoke earlier on. He talked about just getting it done. So that's maybe going to be our focus for us. So I might start with you, Liam, and maybe just introduce yourself. Liam as well. Liam is VP for Research in Ulster University. But during your career, Liam, at Ulster University, you've been a prominent researcher yourself. You've also been significantly engaged in cross-border and collaborative work, but supporting technology-based companies and industry right across the Northwest region. So just maybe, what are the strengths for that Ulster University brings to the partnership here? And we hinted at some of them, I think, earlier on.
Back in the day when AI was probably not that terribly interesting to companies, when we were trying to get that engagement with companies, they're going, not so sure about that. It was we were kind of doing research that wasn't of huge impactfulness at the time, but it's become a much more engaging subject now for companies, absolutely. So again, we bring that expertise in AI, we bring that, I suppose, ability to collaborate. We mentioned the Smart Nano project earlier on, we're partners in that. We also lead a project in smart manufacturing across the 4 nations of the UK, which is funded by Innovate UK, which is great in terms of having that led from Ulster University. We're just about signed, I think, an AI collaboration centre for Northern Ireland in collaboration with partnerships with Queen's, which is great again, which is to get that absorption capacity for small companies across Northern Ireland. But in terms of that, I suppose it's the expertise we bring, but it's also that collaboration piece. We've worked for many years with our colleagues in ATU and its previous forms as well. And there's been that collaboration, I think, in the Northwest. And I think a lot of that has been, dare I touch into politics here, but the 2 council areas have been in the forefront of that and developing that collaboration as a Northwest cross-border region. So I think Derry Council and Donegal Council have to get that credit in terms of working together. It's a region where people move across the border very easily in different companies, and we recognise that in terms of both the universities and the engagement that we have. And I think there's great opportunity here, not just from the technology, but just from the political will to develop this region, but there's huge opportunities in terms of what can go forward. And I was really taken by Wynn's comments earlier on about the co-leveraging of funding. So I'm about to go to a meeting this afternoon. We were presenting on 2 city deal projects. So there's been about $250 million investment in Derry City Council in terms of a city deal project. And one of the leading projects in the innovation space is a joint project in Carl and Cedar. So Carl is essentially AI, Cedar is essentially smart manufacturing. So we're about to bring those 2 projects, and it's a big capital investment in those. So that's the sort of leverage that we can do in terms of the expertise that we have, the collaboration that we have, and that willingness to work across the border as well. I think it's a fantastic opportunity.
Thanks, Liam. And maybe just to say that the whole point of collaboration is that people bring different things. Right now, the technological universities are not allowed to appoint professors to engage in the kind of research that's needed here. And I know that our bid here is looking to appoint 2 jointly appointed professorships in the space over the number of years. So again, it's an example of kind of discussions and collaborations that are possible. So thanks, Liam, and I'll come back to you in a moment. If I could go on to Mark Rensing from Tyndall National Centre. So Mark, you're very welcome. And the word fulcrum was used, I think, earlier on, talking about Seagate has been kind of an industry fulcrum partner. But in this case, Tyndall really are acting in that capacity. They're really the fulcrum around which both partners, UU and ATU, can work together. So how do you envisage Tyndall's kind of long semiconductor experience and research excellence being fully exploited by all the partners and stakeholders to help fulfill the potential of this opportunity?
Thanks, Orla. So Tyndall has a long track record, I suppose, in supporting SMEs through R&D and also in providing training, I suppose, to R&D from both the semiconductor and the photonic spaces, and then commercializing that research then as well. So a number of photonic companies have been spun out of Tyndall and the NMRC, namely and are based in Cork. These would be Sensel and Firecoms. Most recently, I suppose, Infiniled, which we've supported from their inception as one person to their expansion to about 10 people, and then ultimately being bought out by Meta and Oculus a number of years ago. And we're continuing to support all of those photonic companies.
Brilliant. And just maybe a quick question then about Tyndall still. Tyndall works with a lot of higher education institutions on the island and internationally. And do you see, so at the moment we're talking about, you know, a three-way partnership, but do you see that actually involving everybody on the island of Ireland eventually?
Absolutely, yeah. So like we continue to work with all of those photonic companies in Ireland. Through innovation support and also through training, I suppose the Photonics Packaging Group has been very instrumental in delivering innovation support to the SMEs and training programs. Two examples I can give of that would be, I suppose, Embryonics and Timpani Medical. They're based in Galway. They're startups. They've received funding or innovation support through programs that we've helped them essentially develop packaging processes under, and then being able to transfer that knowledge to them. Training then they've also received on packaging processes in the clean room labs in Tyndall. And as a result of that, Timpani Medical, just one example, would have gone on to secure €3 million worth of investment, expanded from 2 people to about 20 people. That's just 2 examples of that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. So I'll go on then to Nick, Dr. Nick Timmins from ATU, and we've heard already from Nick today. And again, we're talking about 3 strands, and we outlined what the 3 strands are earlier on: the Smart Manufacturing Research Facility, the All-Island Centre for Research Training, and then the Skills Training and Education. But where do you think ATU's skill set, what do we bring to the table?
Well, I suppose speaking from the point of view of the Wiser Lab, first of all, we've been around for 15 to 20 years, really helping SMEs and startup companies in the region in the area of wireless sensor applied systems. We're a research group, but with very much an applied bent that we're industry focused. And we work at sort of TR levels, sort of 6, 7, 8. So we're actually delivering products for companies, prototypes that they can go on and commercialize, or sometimes we commercialize them ourselves. We can step them through all the various grants, and Enterprise Ireland would be a big source of funding for a lot of companies in this particular area. So we see our skill sets in terms of the research manufacturing pilot line that would be coming on stream ideally, that we would be the people who would take those photonics chips and turn them into products. We work on the Internet of Things, sensors, digital health, all of these areas which will all be lifted up by this photonics industry. We're the sort of people who will take those chipsets and develop them into products for companies and startups, which is what we've been doing over the last sort of 15 years. So that's that side of things. The other piece would be the education and the training of as was mentioned earlier today, the training around semiconductors, Wynne mentioned it, is huge, and there's a big piece there, not just for training, short form training for existing technicians and people who work in the manufacturing industry, but also to integrate it into our, and what the university have also integrated into our degree programs and master's programs, and then of course the whole research area as well. So it's a sort of a multifaceted approach for us. We've had a long relationship with the University of Ulster, with LAME and the Intelligence Systems Group, going back, probably back 20 years. And that project was about helping SMEs and prototyping and bringing guys. You know, we would deal with big companies, and we would deal with a guy who came in off the street with an idea, and it was a good idea. We'd get them started, and we have, I see Ray there. Ray was with us back in the day, and we had a few people just would come off the street which would seem like a mad idea, but that idea was turned into a product, and the product sold, and they built a company. And so we have that track record, and we have that ability to sort of improve the local ecosystem, and I think that we can bring those skills and with the wider ATU, the education side and training side.
Brilliant, and I know I thought John Andy was in the room. I know he was in the room earlier on, and I would just say there that John Andy and the international team across ATU have developed very strong connections in with India, and we have a huge amount of Indian students coming in for a number of our master's programs, particularly in DevOps and in cloud and in AI actually as well, so and cyber. So we do have connections in to where talent will come as well. So thanks for that, Nick, and we might come back to that a little bit later on.
Thanks, Aaron.
Over to you, Maeve. Enterprise Ireland have been mentioned quite a few times today. SMEs, startups, spin-outs, all mentioned, by a lot of the speakers earlier on as well. And our vision here is clearly to try and grow a cluster, and a cluster is not just large multinationals, it also includes companies at various different stages, spin-outs, and I know that Enterprise Ireland have been key through Knowledge Transfer Ireland. We've applied for funding through the KT Boost programme to establish a tech transfer function in ATU and to hopefully move on from there. But in terms of this particular opportunity, Maeve, how would you characterise the supply chain opportunities for SMEs and spin-outs in this region and in this environment? And how would you see Enterprise Ireland supporting those opportunities?
Thanks, Orla. So I suppose Enterprise Ireland, along with our colleagues in Udaras and in the local enterprise offices, are keenly focused on balanced regional economic development. So we're always trying to consider how we can improve the infrastructure, the ecosystem, etc. So when I look at the region, I look at the Northwest, but I cover the West as well. So in the Northwest, we see an increase in our population. We see an increase in the student population, which is really welcome. And as well as that, we have a growing number of technology companies. But I suppose I don't really see it as technology-only companies. I think every company, I think William mentioned that earlier, this is going to affect every single company in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And Mark alluded to embryonics and timpani. Like, they're in the West region and they're growing all the time. So the supply chain will always at the near future be looking at photonics and sensors and all of that. When I look at our general industry, really, our industry is very, very traditional. We're pushing towards manufacturing 4.0. Some of the companies certainly are not there yet. But we're pushing that in all cases, and they do learn from each other. I think everyone today has mentioned collaboration. So we have formal and informal networks in the region. The formal ones are the BORMAC, which is aligned to ATU Sligo and funded by ourselves to look cross-border at manufacturing and pushing the manufacturing 4.0. They have 20 or 30 really strong members. We have the Kellybegs marine sector group as well, and working hard with them. But I know, and I see Brenda up there, the engineering cluster is an informal cluster, but they have gained huge traction in the last few years working together. And we have a great wee company up in Greencastle Weldits that is doing a huge amount of work in this area internationally. So there's an awful lot going on. There's certainly a lot more to do, but I mean, I would be very excited if this project can get off the ground and get off the ground quickly, that the SMEs and then the larger companies as well will be able to be supported by the cluster or by this project.
And thanks, Maeve. And I know that Enterprise Ireland's support for the technology gateways, including WISAR, has been really crucial to helping us fulfill our remit per the Technological Universities Act and engaging with industry and particularly SMEs, which would be where our historic strength would have been. So thanks, Maeve. And I'm going to maybe move on to Seamus Carroll from the IDA, and delighted as well that Michelle Conahan, the Regional Manager for the IDA, is also in the room. But Seamus, I'd say to you that if this opportunity were to gain a bit of traction and you were looking to use this to sell it to potential international companies as an opportunity to invest here, what do you think are the unique selling points that you'd be looking for in the opportunity. And I think the last closing slides that Valerie had up there talked about, you know, why was this region really attractive? Why was her region attractive? But, you know, what would be the selling points for you and for the IDA in trying to attract other investment, apart from being still in the EU, of course?
Thanks, Orla. So I hear two parts of your question there. The first around the attractiveness of the opportunity, and then what about the region? So I suppose in terms of the opportunity itself, it's been discussed earlier, the importance of skills. There's a massive, the industry has grown massively. Someone mentioned it's going to reach $1 trillion by 2030. There's been about $800 billion of capital investment made in semiconductors since 2021. And the EU has set a target to increase its market share from about 8 to 10% to 20%. So essentially double the size of the industry in the EU. So really, you know, if you look at the EU itself, they're estimating that there could be a 350,000 person skill deficit by 2030. And Germany has looked at it, and over the next number of years, they're estimating that they'll need about 62,000 staff in the industry in Germany. So the opportunity really is any region that can address the skills deficit. That will be a massive attraction for any company, and the primary attraction, I think. And that will be right across the value chain. It'll be from the design side of the business to the manufacturing side of the business. And those of you who have ever seen a fab will understand how complex the process is. Essentially multiple layers supporting a clean room environment. So there's a lot of jobs associated with that as well. And then finally, in terms of packaging. So the skills, and we also mentioned as well smart manufacturing element to the project. That's also very important, and that goes right across all industries, because they're all trying to apply Industry 4.0 principles, more flexibility, more use of data and digital in their manufacturing process. So that, again, the skills associated with that is very important. From the point of view of the research side of it, the CHIPS Act was mentioned earlier, and one of the key elements of the CHIPS Act is what they call pilot lines. The CHIPS Act talks a lot about the lab to fab, speeding the lab to fab environment. In other words, speeding up the cycle of research. A chip can take up to 18 months to develop, and by the time it gets into, it's manufactured and gets into the device, there's already another chip behind it already, ready to go. So almost what you're getting is obsolete by the time you get it. Plus the cost is extremely high. So in semiconductors, the capital or the intensity or the amount spent on research can be up to 20% of revenue. And that's one of the highest of any industry in the world, even surpassing medical. So cost is very important. So for any company that can reduce either the time or the cost in terms of developing a new chip, that's very important. And then we also talked about the importance of photonics as well. And again, that's all pervasive. You hear about PICs, photonic integrated chips, but it also goes across into, discussed earlier about the medical company in Lisbon, you know, diagnostics, it goes into telecommunications, it goes into barcoding, it cuts across everything, so a very important aspect of it. So I think, you know, on the first part of your question, the two opportunities around skills and around research. And then I suppose to your question about what does the region offer, well, firstly, I think you've got probably two of the largest or close to the largest universities on the island of Ireland. Certainly the largest in Northern Ireland and one of the largest in the south. And secondly, then you've got a global industry partner in Tyndall, who's recognized internationally for its research work in semiconductors. Then you have Seagate. There are 3 fabs on the island, which is actually a lot in the context of the scale of Ireland. It was mentioned earlier that we have the most advanced fab in Europe right now, which we have in Fab 34 in Intel, and Analog Devices have just invested 630 million in their plant in Limerick. So it's a key enabling technology there. So I think from the point of view of photonics as well, you know, the importance of that. So thank you for that question.
Thanks very much, Seamus. And I think we also have the opportunity to retain talent in our region through this proposal. And if you look at a lot of the statistics, a lot of our young people, they go elsewhere for education, they don't come back. And that's an issue for us, you know, and this will help be a major attraction to keep people in the region. So finally on the panel, I'm really thrilled to go to Professor Daniel McCaughan, Emeritus Partner with Kernel Capital. And Daniel, like, you've had a long and very distinguished career in the growth, development and management of technology-based companies, especially in Northern Ireland. And from your experiences, what would you say are the key elements that are needed to make sure that this venture, this proposal, this opportunity is realized and sustainable?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. And first of all, I'd like to congratulate the partners in putting this proposal together, because the idea of bringing together the organizations like this, I think, is an absolutely first-class idea. The second thing is, the most important thing to start with is that you have a vision. And it's clear that there's a vision in the proposal. The vision for the future in training, a vision of the future in developing skills in semiconductors and photonics, which are absolutely key to the world today and have been for some considerable years. The third thing is an understanding from the beginning that the mere acquisition of money and getting a project together, that's the first piece of the success. But the real success is in the execution of the things that you're setting out to do. And that is actually something you need to be thinking about from the very beginning. How are all the things that I'm setting out to do going to succeed in the execution of those things, and the way in which they are going to provide for the goals that all of the partners that are in the project are putting into it. And the partners in the project aren't just the partners that are written down as being the organizations. The partners are actually the academic side of it, it's the industrial side of it, and government side of it. Government puts in money into things for good reasons. And the good reasons are to do with economic growth. They are to do with the growth of skills in the region, skills in the country, and the contribution that it's all going to make to the industrial development in the country. And those things aren't short-term. Some of it's short-term. And indeed, Tyndall, for example, and I was involved with Tyndall from the day it was invented, because I happened to be a friend of Jerry Rickson, who was the first, the person who started the National Microelectronics Research Center in the first place. And Tyndall has done things, and can do things, and has done things that are for the immediate benefit of something. So one of the companies that Kernel had needed some proof of that the technology actually meant anything, and we put 100K into them with the belief that it should be, or the instructions that it should be spent in Tyndall to actually prove the technology would work. So one of the things that the pilot lines, and the things related to the pilot lines and the skills that are going to be put into that, will be for the immediate and immediate links and immediate things that you can do for the local companies, whether it's a big one like Seagate or the small ones that will come out of it. The second thing is to understand that research has two pillars. It's many pillars, but there are two at least. And one of them is research that will bring you to academic excellence on a world standard on the things that you do. And it's important that some, at least, of the research that's done in this project is absolutely world class. The second thing, however, is sometimes the research is research to help with the needs and goals of the large and small companies that are part of your pillar, part of your project. And that isn't necessarily, it has to be world class in the general sense, but in particular, it may be the local requirements, which are instant requirements or short-term requirements, or something that'll help develop over the year and say, and Seagate, for example, I know, has a whole series of programs that it does with universities all around Ireland and the UK and elsewhere that actually helps, and it helps and provides grants and provides combination things with Seagate, helping to give them wafers, chips, things that will help them do the work that links into what Seagate is doing and helps with Seagate's short-term, medium and long-term problems. And that's a very important part of the things that this project will do. And from what I see, from what was written in the first document that I've seen, it's already part of the objectives of that, and that's extremely important as well. And access to excellence for everybody. Access to excellence in industry for the academics and the academic part of all of this, and for the university itself here, and for UU and for Tyndall. Now, Tyndall and UU are already doing that a lot, and I believe it's happening already also in ATU, and that's an extremely important access to excellence. But it's access to excellence for the companies, so they have access to the excellence that comes in those universities and those that they're linked to and their partners. And all in all, when the project actually comes together, the sharing of the vision, the most important thing in one sense is the sharing of the vision between all of the partners. And that's not as easy as it sounds, because the vision that you would have at ATU isn't necessarily the same vision that would be in the small companies, and the same vision that comes in the large companies, and that comes in the government. So you have to sit down and consciously decide that you're going to work with everybody that are partners in all of that to share all of the things that I've just talked about.
That's a fascinating, Professor McConnell, that's a fascinating kind of summary of the building blocks I think that we need. Certainly listening to you talk about the research and the two pillars in the research, the academic excellence at world standard, you know, I know, and maybe William will touch on this a bit later on, the idea that all the universities on the island of Ireland potentially will have a stake in this. You'd be looking at the excellence in Queen's and UCD and elsewhere. But the key piece around the local needs and supporting local companies and regional companies. And I do want to pay a shout out to Northwest Regional Assembly. As colleagues here, ATU would have applied, led by Rick Officer here, for the TU Rise scheme, and that deadline was only last week. And that's really to help us get our research capabilities and capacities up a level from where it's currently at. So I'm delighted with that kind of summary, a really neat summary of all of the different ingredients that we need. I'm conscious of time, and before I wrap up, what I might do is just go around and ask each of you really, you know, back to Hugh's words earlier on, just get it done, and what you think our next steps would be. And it certainly struck me as well that in all of the cases, when Wynne was talking earlier on about the amounts invested in Cardiff and Swansea, hundreds of millions of euro in each of those institutions. The political will certainly seems to me to be a big piece of this. So I might start with you, Nick. What's the one thing that we need to do? What do we need to do next?
Well, yeah, the political will is the big thing. You know, we have this proposal sitting in government, and there's reasons why, and it's been, I believe, I understand, not that I have any major contacts in the central government, but I understand it's been received well. But there are obviously, because it's a cross-border injection of funding into this whole region, and there's willingness to do that on the government side, but there's obvious issues with the political situation in the north, why things aren't being wrapped through. One of the reasons for this event was to try and keep some heat and momentum going with this proposal, you know, because it's been submitted in March. We know it's been welcomed, warmly received. It's also going to be a very complex proposal because it's not going to be funded necessarily from one agency. It's going to be multiple agencies, and so all that has to be sorted out. So really, but it needs, I think it comes down to that government. We can do all we can do, and that's what we're trying to do at the moment, which is show us all of ourselves, all the partners to our best light, show them all the capabilities, show the linkages and the relationships that are all strong and real, and they're going to work, and that there's success previously here. We just need to make sure that we have that push at a government level, and we get that initial thrust, and then I think then that's where the real, you know, I think the situation will be, we might get the nod, but then we've got to put a proposal together. The proposal was an original 10-page. Now it was pretty, as Jim will tell you, it was pretty well written, and and we thought long and hard about it and the elements, and we put ballpark funding around it, but it's going to be so much more complex than that, so that'll be our next stage. But hopefully, I think it has to start with government.
Lovely, Nick, thank you. And Seamus, any thoughts on our next steps?
Well, I think, you know, internationally the momentum is there. It's there in the EU, it's there in the US, it's global right now around semiconductors. But I think the key part of it, and I think it's a challenge actually for the industry itself, is really communicating the benefits clearly of what it is. As mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't really understand semiconductors. They know the name, but they don't realize how pervasive they are and how they impact on all the different technologies and industry sectors in Ireland. So it's really, I think, about communicating the benefits as best as possible.
Brilliant. Thanks, Seamus. Mark, any comments or any advice from Tyndall?
Sure, yeah. So I would say talk to the companies and the stakeholders that everybody's engaged with, and get their feedback and include it in that. Not just looking at the impact of things like knowledge transfer and training and solutions that have been solved. There's other things that are not considered as well. Like last month we hosted NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology in Tyndall, from the States to invite policy. We introduced them to some of our US collaborators, and interesting, one of the things that came out of there of high value to them was the sheer scale of international networks and connections that Tyndall has, that they say was invaluable to them. So I think little nuggets like that are really, really invaluable, and maybe include those.
Brilliant, absolutely. Thanks for that, Mark. Maeve, anything from an Enterprise Ireland perspective?
Well, notwithstanding all that's been said, to keep going, definitely continue to deepen the relationships, because this is going to be a tough road ahead, even if the money is forthcoming. Everyone's going to have to be on the same page. And having worked, and we've all worked together on cross-border projects, it's really, really important that we all have the same vision and that we continue working towards that vision now, because it's not something that you can develop overnight. There will be ERDF funding coming down the track from Enterprise Ireland, hopefully launched at the end of the month, for additional funding where CLGs or DACs can apply for funding. So there might be something there to investigate, a kind of a next step before this, additional funding comes down the track. But collaboration requires effort, and I would keep going on the track of developing the relationships now.
That's great. Thanks, Maeve. I think the mention of the DAC gives me a few shivers, but anyway, I'm sure we've been there before, and I think we'll get there. Daniel, any kind of nuggets of wisdom as to what next for us?
Well, a couple of things, comments. The first thing is, in the venture capital world, you set out to get a fund, and the fund you're going to invest. And when you get the fund, then the thing you start thinking about the next day is, how am I going to get the next fund? Mm-hmm. So here you have a project which is a substantial project, but you have to be thinking from when you are putting the project in and when you're going to get it, what is success? Well, success is actually doing things well enough and at a high enough level that you'll get the next project. And you're thinking about immediately where it's going to go and what are you going to go next, where are you going to go next after that. Part of that is thinking about the objectives. So you have to think about, what are the objectives of my project? And objectives come, and again, you can make as many classifications as you like, but there's certainly two that you can think of. The first one is the general objectives. And the general objectives can be very wide and general. I'm going to improve the level of skills in the region and all of those things, which are all very good things to do. But you also need to put in what you might think of as local objectives. What are the objectives that I can realistically achieve within the timescale of the project? Not realistic things that I can easily achieve, but stretching objectives that mean that I have to really work hard at it. You have to work hard at it. And you have to give yourself objectives that require you work hard at it. But you don't give yourself objectives that are so hard to do that you'll never actually get there. Mm-hmm. So getting those stretching objectives into a project is really important, because if you achieve those stretching objectives and you show your funders and the people that are partners that you're achieving those stretching objectives, that's a really important part to getting the next project and the next after that. Because what you're looking at here isn't just the growth of a small group of people. You're looking at something much bigger. When I joined Nortel in 1988, the company objective was to have 50 plus engineers working in a room at the back of the factory. My objective was to have 500 people in an engineering center that was important to the company and important to the country as well as that. And even though Nortel finally fell apart in the 2000s for other regions, we actually achieved that. We had 550 people in the organization. We had 110 people after 18 months working in a new building. You can achieve stretching objectives if you really set out to do it. And you have to convince people that those objectives are not just your objectives as the people who lead it, but the people down at the ground level who are going to work on these projects. They have to believe that what you're doing is achievable, is worthwhile, is good to do, and something they want to work on, and they keep working on. And if I look at William and NMRC, William has people working for him that were in NMRC from the beginning, who believed in the objectives of NMRC, and who have seen those objectives fulfilled in an organisation that's now a world-class place that would be on a level with what was world-class when they started, like IMEC and places like that, and would be regarded with the same level. So don't let yourself be limited here in this project to thinking this is a small regional area and we're going to achieve whatever is in the project to start with. You're looking to build things in the Northwest to a level that in 20 years' time is going to be large and huge and important to the region, important to Ireland, and important in the world. And that's what you're going to try and do. And that's what's really important.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Daniel. I think shades and echoes of what Wynne said earlier on around setting your targets, achieving those, but making sure you have targets on your horizon as well. So, Liam, I might give you the last word, seeing as you're...
Thank you, Orla, and it's very difficult to go follow Danny, because that's what I was going to say as well. We need to start... But I was going to make it more flippant and say, let's bring Jim out of retirement, since he read the last one so well. Let's get him back to write the next proposal. But I think there's been lots of really, really good comments in terms of the collaboration, the partnership. I think that has to be deepened and strengthened. I think that's really, really important. I do think we have to extend it. I don't think we should limit it to the current partners, but like Danny says, I think we need to extend that out. There's lots of great partnership down the west currently in terms of a shared island project. Like we can actually reach out to Cork as well. We're only going as far as Limerick at the moment, but we can do that. But I've been long enough in this game. I remember back as a PhD student, and I was at Queen's, and there was a project with Queen's, Trinity and Cork, and that was back in the day before there was a huge number of PhD students in universities in the south. And I look now very enviously at the number of PhD students in the south, and you just look at the investment in education, and what I've looked at over the last 20, 30 years, the speed of moving through the TRL levels from really advanced research to adoption has just dramatically increased. So we need to be focused on what's the next technology that's going to take this consortium and this group to the next level. But like what Danny was saying, what are we going to focus on next that's going to make this work, to make it sustainable? Because we can't stand still. It has to be continually, as I use that lovely word, pivoting, that we have to move on into something else. We just have to evolving and making this work for the region, but work for more partners and more involvement. Danny, you want to come back on me and stuff, and don't you? Yeah.
Well, you said that your first involvement, your PhD, was a project between Trinity and Cork and Belfast. And how that project came about was that we had a meeting at Cork of the board of NMRC, of the advisory board for NMRC. And I took Jerry Rickson, who was the leader of NMRC, and David Ryan, who was from Queen's, and Frank Boland, who was from Trinity. And I took them into Jerry's office. And this was in NMRC, which for those of you who don't know the building, is this ancient building, which has got these, Jerry's office had this huge lock in it. You know, it's one of these keys you see on the Antiques Roadshow. And I took the key, it's a lock for the room, and I took the key and I locked the door. And I said to the other three, you're not getting out of this room until you agree to put together a proposal to the International Fund for Ireland for a joint project between the three universities. And we sat down, and in an hour we put together a proposal which resulted in the IFI-funded Centre for Microelectronics. And it did 3D microelectronics and the design for 3D. And you might say, where is that now? Every integrated circuit you have is a 3D structure. It has multi-layers, and some of it in the technology came out of that very project. So congratulations, you contributed to something that was global even then.
Thank you for helping me for my PhD. So
my thanks to the panel. Thank you all. I'm sure that Jim felt he was in a locked room for a while there earlier in the year. But so open to the floor. I know that we're running out of time and the lunch is beckoning us, and there'll be a chance to chat. But if there's any questions, any burning questions that you want to ask, feel free to raise a hand and we'll get a mic to you. Clearly a sign that the panel were absolutely outstanding and covered every topic. So if there are no specific questions, Maeve, excellent.
It's unusual to ask the panel myself, but anyway.
Ask the audience.
Well, I suppose it comes back to, I think somebody in the first panel talked about women in STEM, and in this project, is there going to be a working group or a working package that will include bringing more women in? Because it's really, really important to the whole project that would happen.
I'm actually going to Lithuania tomorrow because I'm part of a Women in STEM project, and we're right here signed up with other 10 institutes. It's a critical issue. There's a general critical issue around people coming to do engineering in Ireland, and it's been a problem. In Ireland, the Western countries over the last 20 years has been a fall down in graduates. But if we could even get the number of women to match the number of men, that would be a huge benefit to everything we have to do here. So it's a major issue, and it's a multifaceted issue. My own personal, we've tried, there's been so many STEM projects that have come and gone and done nothing. I think government needs to incentivize people to bring them into universities to do engineering, maybe rather than, medicine and law has been oversubscribed with women actually at the moment, and they're moving away from engineering and science. So, yeah, listen, to me it's a hot topic, and we'd have to make sure we'd address that. Not only for that's the right thing to do, but even for the success of the project, because we need to get people. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, so we've been involved in a Maynooth-led SFI-funded project called STEM Passport to Success, which is really about encouraging particularly women from kind of underdeveloped schools and disadvantaged areas to get involved in STEM. And it's going to happen right across all of our ATU campuses starting fairly soon, and looking forward to really supporting that project as a way to get people in while they're still at a kind of an age where they can realize the opportunities that are there. So my thanks. Sorry, there's a question.
Orla, thank you. Just wanted to come on quickly to say thank you for hosting the conference firstly. I suppose my name is Paul McClarty, I'm one of the Sinn Féin MLAs in Derry, and I think it's been really important what you've touched on already about this as a Northwest region. It's really good to hear the passion in the room and from yourselves for the Northwest. I think that's critical, is capturing that passion and that opportunity. And to touch back on, a lot of this has already been covered, but what Valerie said is about the political will. And I suppose from ourselves, we want to be in a position to lead government north and south. So we're very much here today to listen, to learn from yourselves. And one of the questions which I suppose we've had throughout this is really, what would you see as the priorities for an incoming government on how we would help to lead this from a government perspective?
So Liam, if you want to answer that.
Padraig, I can give you a lovely answer on that one from a Northern Ireland perspective. So in the North, we talked about skills and the number of people going to university. In Northern Ireland, I'm going to give very rough figures here, about a third go to Queen's, a third go to Ulster, and a third go across the water to GB. We would love to see more university places in Northern Ireland, and just to keep people here, because we know, earlier you mentioned this earlier on, we know when people go to university, they tend to stay in and around the area where they graduate for, I can't remember, it's like an 80-20-20 rule, like 80% of graduates stay 20 years within 20 miles of where they graduate. That's what we'd love to see, more places, particularly, and there's we know there's a Northern Ireland government initiative to increase the number of places in Derry as well. So those type of implementations are going to need policy changes to allow that to happen. So that's a big ask, and given the financial situations, we know it's a huge ask, but for the longer term development and economic development of the region, we need more people, skilled people, and to stay in the region. So that would be my request to you. So.
Thank you, Liam, and I'm sure that's a conversation that we'll pick up over lunch as well. Can I thank everybody in the panel? Really appreciate your time, and we're coming near the end now, so I think we'll call on Professor William Scanlon, CEO of Tyndall National Institute, to draw it all together with some closing remarks.
Thank you.
So, there we go.
Okay. Thank you, Orla. I wrote down some notes because I'm going to forget who to thank, right? So I'll start with the thanks, and then I'll make my final remarks. So I want to thank the A2 President, Orla Flynn, for hosting this event here today, and CoLab, the building we're in, and Wiser, particularly Nick, Steve, and Maria for the local arrangements.
Nick, Stephen and Maria are also part of the team who put the agenda together. Peter Devine, also from Ulster University, who mainly kept us all focused on actions and outcomes, which was really important for me. Peter Smith from Tyndall, who our commercial director as well. Jerry Conlon and Mark Gubbins from Seagate. So that was the team that put the event together. So thank you so much. Thank you to all our panelists and our speakers for their engagements and insights, which were incredible. I think you'll all agree with that we had an amazing set of inputs from across a wide body of stakeholders there. So that expertise, those insights and expertise will be invaluable to the consortia team going forward. But most of all, I want to thank you all for joining us for this invite-only event. You're very privileged. We didn't invite hundreds and hundreds of people. And in fact, we got the most excellent selection of people that we invited here today. So thank you so much for coming along. It's really important that you heard some of the discussion, but also that you participated in the conversation, and I'm sure that'll continue over lunch. Orla, Liam and myself are more than happy to engage individually directly with any of you to discuss this vision that we have. And as was mentioned, we're only at the outline stage, and we're going to be working with governments, hopefully north and south, but certainly the southern government to try and advance that vision. And particularly how the Northwest region can play its part in terms of the global opportunity that Ireland has in semiconductors, and in particular photonics, because it's an area that we do have a leading edge, as I mentioned earlier. I think it was Mark from my own team mentioned that we are supporting companies, really advanced growing companies in the space and healthcare sectors in photonics. And, you know, they're actually working with the most sophisticated technology that is made elsewhere, but it could be made in Ireland. And we're, you know, that's something that we have, the opportunity we have is to leverage the existing parts of the semiconductor value chain that we have here, including all those applications, the med tech companies, the pharmaceutical companies. Industry 4.0 was mentioned. All of that needs semiconductor technologies. Somebody else mentioned communications, which is my own background. I noticed we're back on wired mics as well. So there's some work to do on the communications part. Anyway, let's see. One thing, I think it's a small window of opportunity, and certainly, you know, there's a lot of investment in the EU. We heard about it, and the US. There's a lot of focus on this sector, which wasn't traditionally there. Wynne mentioned at the very start, like 5 years ago, you know, nobody wanted to know. AI was all the rage. You know, you're doing battery technology. You know, so. And batteries need semiconductors, and so does AI. Absolutely. They wouldn't work without it, and that's the truth. So we have a small window of opportunity. I see that we heard about the Smart Nano NI project, which is a really an important investment that's already taken place the other side of the border, and it's been led by Seagate. That's a good first step, and I think the UK might make some additional investments, and if we can get that east-west conversation going as well as the northwest border region conversation as well. I think it's time for the Irish government to invest further in semiconductors, to anchor FDI, to grow SMEs, and to see new startups in the space. And I'm seeing the Secretary General for Enterprise in 2 weeks, and I'm going to deliver that exact message. To work on a cross-border basis to make the island of Ireland the best place to build and grow a business that will be part of a $1 trillion market by 2030. So I'm going to end by asking for your help in making this a reality. Go and enjoy your lunch. Thank you.